Do you really need a gravel bike to go gravel riding, or can a road bike work just as well? In this video, we'll find out. So this is a brand new Canyon Ultimate, and as you can see, I swapped the 25mm wide slick tyres it came with, and I put these on, a 36mm wide WTB Volpine gravel tyre. And would you Adam and Eve it, they actually fit. I'm staggered, I can't believe it. Although clearance is pretty tight around the crown and especially at the front mech battery, but they do fit. Now the idea for this came from Mattia van der Poel and his teammate who won the UCI Gravel World Champs in Italy last weekend, the first such event, on this bike with some Vittoria tyres. I think they had a 33 in the front and a 35 on the back. So road race bikes with gravel tyres winning the first ever Gravel World Champs. Probably not representative of what gravel is to most people, but definitely raised a few eyebrows, especially mine. And it does raise the question of why and how a bike like this does fit wide tyres. Now, according to Canyon, the maximum clearance for this bike is a 32mm tyre. So what gives? Why and how do the wide tyres fit? Well, most bike brands are very conservative when it comes to actual tyres you can fit on a road bike. And there is an international standard that dictates a minimum of 6mm of clearance between the frame and the tyre for safety reasons. Now, Canyon, like most bike manufacturers, won't recommend you go any wider than that maximum tyre permitted for the bike. But many people do, and if you accept the responsibilities for going wider than the tyre recommended for the bike, then you can indeed fit a gravel tyre to a road race bike. And it really shows how the modern road race bike has evolved over the last 10 years. My old Super 6 Evo won't take anything wider than a 25, but here we are in 2022 with a road race bike that I take a 25 slick tyre or a 36mm gravel tyre. But should you? Does it actually work when you hit a gravel? Well, let me get changed, I'll go for a spin and find out. So, does it work? Well, yes, clearly it worked kind of well. I've come to some of the smoothest gravel I know in the Cotswolds. I wouldn't go anywhere near a rooty, tooty, rocky trail I'd normally venture forth on a gravel bike. And luckily it's dry, so there's no mud to contend with, because clearance would definitely be a factor. So it does work, and if your gravel resembles this very smooth, hard-packed, kind of dirt terrain, it might be all you need. You won't need anything bigger, chunkier, or more capable. But there are a few factors from riding a road bike on gravel. Firstly, the ride is quite firm. These are skinny tyres by gravel standards, and I run in super low pressures, but the ride is firm. Lots of feedback, getting lots of jarring impacts through the saddle and through the one-piece carbon handlebar and stem. And that's a problem with a narrow tyre like this, the same as with cross. Yes, you can run a low pressure to give more comfort, traction and control, but you vastly increase your risk of a puncture, especially on the unpredictable terrain you get out here in the countryside. So you have to compromise and run a high pressure to minimise that risk of a puncture, and then you get quite a hard ride. And that's really where a 40 or a 45mm wide gravel tyre comes into its own. Big volume, low pressures, minimal risk of a puncture, and then the geometry differences. It feels really skittish. It doesn't feel as planted, as settled as a gravel bike with a longer wheelbase and slacker head angle. And it feels pretty sketchy, I have to admit, and does remind me of riding a CX bike on anything but a smooth, well-maintained cross course around a playing field. So yes, you can do it, but not sure I want to for much longer. So let me pull over and talk about some of the key differences and reason why a gravel bike, I think, is still better than a race bike with fat tyres. So yes, you can ride smooth gravel and dirt roads on this road bike with the gravel tyres fitted, but to me it doesn't make this a gravel bike, and already I can hear the angry comments down below. So let me explain. There are a few key issues that for me mean this really isn't a gravel bike, and if you are wanting to go gravel riding, adventure riding, bike packing, whatever you want to call it, you are better off with a modern dedicated gravel bike, and I'll explain the reason why. Now the biggest one is clearance, As you can see, the clearance between the tyres and the frame, that front mech battery and the fork is very, very tight. And while okay when it's dry and dusty like it is right now, I know as soon as you add mud to the mix, that clearance will be an issue. I've ridden gravel bikes where mud clearance is a real factor, and this will definitely be on the worst side of bad. And that's not to mention sticks, large stones and other debris that can get lodged between the tyre, the frame and the fork, and can lead in many cases to punctures from that stone being pushed between the tyre and the frame. So you want clearance for mud to fall through, but also for stones, sticks and other objects to fall through as well and not puncture the tyres. And that really is a big area where modern gravel bikes are pulled away from the cross bikes and the road bikes they were loosely based on in the early days. And for the riding I do, the terrain I ride on, I know it's the same for many people watching as well. A 40, a 42 or a 45mm wide gravel tyre is the best compromise of comfort, puncture resistance, speed and all the other factors you want in a gravel tyre. The geometry differences between a road race bike with gravel tyres fitted and a proper gravel bike might be small, but are very important in my experience at least. This might look like a gravel bike, but the geometry differences ensure it doesn't work as well as a gravel bike. So a gravel bike, like the company's own Grizzle, has a much longer wheelbase, giving you much more stability when riding on loose surfaces and at high speeds. And then the head angle is slacker, giving you more control when riding down steep trails, so it's less twitchy, less weight over the front wheel. And the stack, the height of the front of the bike is taller as well, to bring the handlebars a bit higher, give you more comfort on long rides over varied and challenging terrain. Gearing is another massive difference between a road race bike like this and a proper gravel bike. This is a road race bike, so geared as you would expect. Big chainset on the front, very tight, close ratio cassette, giving those smooth cadence steps for high speed action. Of course, if you are riding flat gravel tracks, and of course like the UCI World Champs we saw in Italy, this gearing will be just fine. But where I ride and the trails I try and ride on my gravel bikes, the average speed is lower and the climbs are often much steeper and on slipperier terrain, mud, rocks, stones, roots as well. And lower gearing on a gravel bike is a big benefit. So a bigger range cassette, smaller chainset at the front, one by as well is often popular, so gearing is a big difference. Now you could modify this bike with a bigger cassette and a smaller chainring, but it'd be easier just buy a gravel bike in the first place and do it properly. Another key aspect is road race bikes clearly don't have the versatility baked into them like many modern gravel bikes. You can't fit mud guards for a start, you can't fit extra water bottles, you can't fit extra cages for carrying stuff. So not designed for bike packing, long day rides where you want to be self-sufficient. So not designed, geared up for that sort of riding at all. I've only been riding for a few minutes now and already I was digging the rim on a rock. I haven't punctured, thanks to tubeless, but that's a problem with these tyres. Yes, they allow me to ride light gravel on a road bike, but the margin for error is ever so small compared to a 40 or 45mm gravel tyre. And the other factor is comfort. I run the tyres a bit higher than I would like to minimise the risk of a puncture, even though I dig the rim a few times. And the ride is hard. Lots of jarring feedback. You hit bigger rocks and you know about it. There isn't that same comfort you get from a gravel bike on fat tyres. It also minimises control as well. The tyres are pinging off rocks and it's more of a battle to keep it going in the direction I want it to go in. So not as easy to ride at high speed on loose terrain at all. So not as accessible as a gravel bike depending on your level of rider skill. In my attempt to replicate Mathieu van der Poel's setup, I'm also using road shoes and pedals, which I'll never do riding gravel, because you never know where you might get off, walk the bike through a muddy section, a bit of unrideable trail, and with road shoes and cleats, you're going to have a real battle to get back in again. And that's why mountain bike shoes and SPD pedals are better for riding gravel bikes. So fitting these tyres to this road race bike was a fun experiment, and I can totally see why Mathieu van der Poel and others use road race bikes at the UCI Gravel World Champs, because of course it was very tame and lacked any technical section to really benefit a gravel bike over a bike like this. And while this setup might work for some people if you have very smooth and dry dirt roads, I think for most people, and myself especially, a gravel bike is a much better all-round package: clearance, gearing, comfort, geometry. So while this sort of works, it doesn't really work, and I'll stick to a gravel bike going forward. And if you want to see a video roundup of the best gravel bikes currently available, then check the video up here, and don't forget to subscribe by hitting this button right here. But that's all for today. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you again very soon.